here to share with you all building an international brand, right? And creating a global presence from that Caribbean perspective. So to tell you a little bit about myself, because I do think that you have to have some context before you understand, well, why is this person qualified or experienced enough to really share with me, how to build a global brand, right? So context is very important. And why I said a Caribbean perspective, because context is important, right? Context as to where you're from, where your business exists, it's very important to consider that in everything that you do around building your brand. So this is my business partner, David, and we started the company 16, 17 years ago. And we were just really passionate about food, local ingredients. We like to cook. And we would always try to find like the freshest fish or the freshest seasoning. And we both worked at the bank, and I would bring seasoning to work, and David would bring fish from Las Cuevas. And pretty soon, we had customers, we had persons asking for this service and for these fresh ingredients. So that's how the business really started. From there, we've been able to build 4 businesses within the food landscape. And Market Movers, David and I are e-commerce agri-preneurs. We're passionate about technology. We're passionate about health and convenience. So that's where Market Movers plays that role. You can order online. We were the first online e-grocery in Trinidad and Tobago. Next, we launched our moving table. We are local farm-to-table ambassadors. And what that means is we believe that Caribbean meals and Caribbean restaurants should use as much local inputs as possible, right? We're also pioneering agro-processors. We recently, well, 7 years ago, feels recently, launched Farm and Function Limited, and we are agro-processors of frozen fruits. We then launched Market Movers Design, where we now help food brands all across the Caribbean with their branding, packaging design, marketability. So how did I really get here? I didn't start out knowing all this. And it's through my experience. I want to just share with you all how I was able to build brands that were able to adapt to a global environment, and just how much we've grown over the years. So Market Movers, literally, you can go online and buy a breadfruit on the internet and have it delivered to your door, right? We started online because we couldn't afford a regular brick and mortar store. I designed a Yahoo jot form and a Yahoo website, and that's how we started the business at the time. And through that platform, we were able to pivot and evolve the business. We recently pivoted by launching a line of to-go wellness meals, because although, yes, we had fresh ingredients and groceries, now we realize people are even so much more busy that they need their food ready-made and ready to serve, right? And they're always on the go. So just to show you some growth with Market Movers, when we started in 2009, we had 10 online customers. They were basically people we knew from the bank who would have registered on the platform. And then we now have over 10,000 online shoppers, right? From both locally and across the world. So we then went from 10 deliveries to over 500,000 deliveries made so far. Our portfolio of products went from just like 25 products to over 1,000. We've done over 500,000 deliveries across the country since we started. And we've actually delivered over 1.25 million pounds of local food on the internet. And I know that sounds like a lot, and it is over a period of time. But what that means is never take no for an answer. Because when we had this business idea, we were told that Trinidadians would never buy food on the internet, that people would not buy food on the internet. And, we've been able to prove that that's not necessarily true, right? So our moving table, again, within the agriculture, within the food landscape, we wanted to create an event where we could show and demonstrate that you can use local fresh ingredients to create farm-to-table meals. And we wanted to create something offline where we could get customers to experience the food, experience the ingredients that we sell, and just have a conversation with them, right? Of course, we integrate a lot of local ingredients like local chocolate, and we use that to demonstrate that, you know, we don't only have to have strawberries and berries and imported foods to experience a fine dining or authentic meal. We then launched Farm and Function. So Farm and Function is a range of locally grown frozen fruit products. It's 100% locally grown in Caribbean. We literally grew the fruits, process it, blast freeze it, and package it, and then sell it throughout grocery stores across Trinidad and Tobago. We actually compost all our organic matter, so it's then turned into compost for future crops. And none of this happened like strategically. It was literally just sort of play by play, fall into place, right? Let me just make sure. Right. So this is a brand. Sorry. So this is a brand. Over time, we've now been able to export the frozen fruits into different markets. We're now in Barbados and Dominica. And to date, we've been able to grow the brand across the Caribbean, at least in 2 other islands, where, you know, taking something 100% local and bringing it to new markets. We've been able to generate over 50,000 US in export sales. And again, it sounds like a lot, but it's a lot of work, a lot of expertise that goes into it, and it's just from experience, a lot of experience. So through Barbados, we have, you know, where we customize the brand. This is us on the shelf with all the imported fruits. And this is where we customize like the recipes and the cocktails after Barbados, beaches in Barbados and things like that. Lastly, there's Market Movers Design, where we help food brands, you know, with their branding, their packaging design, their marketability. Because what we found is when Farm and Function made it on the shelf, we were just competing with imported brands. And we wanted to create a landscape where Caribbean food brands can also be competitive and marketable and reach, you know, have more trust within the channels. So these are some of the brands we've designed for. We've now supported over 200 local food agri-preneurs with their branding, packaging design, marketability. So, you know, we have that experience. But the point is to never forget, obviously, that, you know, we started somewhere. We just started with an idea, with a passion. And I think that entrepreneurship and you know, back then when you take a camera, a picture, it would put the date stamp on it. So we really did start this business in 2009. And we've grown bit by bit, but with a global thinking in play, right? So today we're gonna go through, I have a quick agenda. It's 5, basically it's a doing agenda. It's not something I just wanna tell you about. It's almost like you have to activate and do the thinking behind it to figure out, you know, is your brand, or are you ready to take your brand to that next global level, right? I still not always sure, but at least there are ways and experiences that I've encountered that has helped me navigate that and to be able to be ready for a global market, right? So the agenda today is doing, as I said, so we'll be assessing ourselves, assessing your current brand. And we can't go too in depth with everybody's own, but it is something that I want you all to apply to yourselves. So we're gonna assess, just take a look at our brand, take a look at some other brands and see how to really audit your brand, to see, is your brand ready for that next level, that next growth stage, right? And then we're gonna be designing now. We're gonna see how to determine our brand value. So you assess your brand, we're gonna be designing now what your brand could really look like. And I will say, take this seriously. Every training I've ever been to, when I was now starting, I would just soak up as much information as possible, because it's very important in this growth stage or this beginning stage that you apply the things that you learn and that you have the capacity to learn right now. So you're assessing, you're designing, then we'll be building out what your brand could look like if you build it within these fundamentals of what makes up a strong brand. And that comes from data, it comes from research of other companies and things like that. And then we'll be, you've built this brand, you've built this strong thought process around it, but you need to sustain it, right? You can't just build it and not think about 10 years down the road, is this concrete gonna work, right? So you need to find ways to sustain your brand, and it's really finding that growth path, right? You should always be growing as a brand. And then lastly, we're gonna look at growth, right? So we're gonna be growing. How can we now, we've assessed it, we've designed it, we've built it, we've found a way to sustain it, and we want it to continue to grow. So how do we apply these steps to continuously grow and evolve our brand, right? Now, your brand it doesn't always have to grow like this, right? You can grow while making a loss, but you can learn new skills. So just knowing that you have to use your context and your experience, there's no one exact way all the time, right? So that's the agenda. We're going to go through the assessing. And before we go through fully the assessing of everything, right? So I want you to apply your brand perspective to everything we discussed, right? It's about taking this idea, taking these feelings or passions that are all tangled up on the left, and turning it into something cohesive, something that makes sense, something that reflects who you are. And you want to apply your brand perspective with some of the things that I'm going to go through here. So in order to understand your brand value, so the perspective is what's going to help you understand that brand value, right? So a strong brand value is one that combines your unique experience, your perspectives, and expertise within a global framework or context, right? So we can no longer think about our brand in isolation or in silos, right? We now have a global audience. We have access to global markets. So we now need to take what is special, what is unique about us, and fit it into a framework, a global framework, like what is required, compliance, but still making sure that you stand out and differentiate yourself, that you build a brand that is recognizable, that there's memory, like people have recall of it, and they want to continue using your brand after. So in the first part of assessing, right? So we're going to assess your brand, right? And I'm going to just show you some quick tips on how you could really, how you can really, how you can really assess your brand and audit without taking it too personally, right? So you need to audit, you need to be honest right now with yourself. And you need to answer some of these questions in your own way. You can also answer in the chat, and Chadron will feed that information back to me. But the first thing you need to know is really, what is a brand, right? We then need to know what are your brand elements, right? So there's some fundamental brand elements that should exist in every brand. And then I'm going to show you some case studies of how you can apply and make sure that your brand, no matter how small or how big, that it is continuing with that messaging, right? So what is a brand, right? Your brand is really your voice, and your product or service is the souvenir. It's that thing that the customer takes home, and it reflects that brand, right? It reflects your voice, it reflects who you are. And everything sparks from an individual idea or a group idea, right? So your brand is really your voice. It may not just be you alone, it could be your team, it could be the founders, but it's that voice, and then the product is what the customer now takes as a souvenir of that messaging, right? So if you were to look at brand elements, so do you have these elements defined within your company? So we're going to take a look at your own brand. I mean, and it's okay if, you know, you don't have all these components, but these are some key elements that you should have when you're constructing your brand. And you should consider before really trying to go into sales and selling more and more, clarifying this is going to be really important, because when that growth happens, you need to have these things clearly identified, right? So what are some brand elements? You have your logo. So I know most of you might know, obviously, or have a logo, or definitely know what a logo is, right? And it's that visual identity of the brand, right? I would have showed you our logos before. And those are that visual identity where someone can identify and go, aha, that's that brand that I know and that I like, or that I trust, right? So another component or element of your brand is that slogan. What's that short phrase that communicates information about the brand, right? What's that slogan, right? So Subway, eat fresh. You know, I'm sure you can think of a lot of slogans, and you can hear the slogan and think of the brand immediately, right? So you have to think of what is that short phrase that reflects, you know, what does your brand do? What is it actually, what's the promise it's trying to fulfill, right? So the name, so the brand name can be, you know, that name of the brand that captures the main theme around it, right? So the name of the brand name, like Chubby, let's say, right? So you know that's a brand name, and people associate it with what that brand stands for, what the slogan might be, right? Then you have your tone. So it's how do you speak to your audience, in what tone? This could be a musical message, it could be written around the brand, it could be different layers. But it's really, are you like happy brand? Are you a luxurious brand? Are you you know, a trusted brand? Then what are the tones that you are going to use, right? So if my brand is around food, you know, the tone has to be fresh, it has to feel nutritious, you know, all the things that speak to what my brand stands for. And then there's the character, right? So a special type of symbol which can take on a human or real life character. So we all know some characters, they don't have to all be cartoon characters or, you know, gimmicky. A character could be the founder of the company. There are different ways in which you can use that character, but it does reflect key elements of your brand, you know, what do you stand for? And that's really important when you're building out your brand. And then there's lastly your packaging. So that's an extension of your brand. It's an element of your brand, right? So you can do all the right things, have the right messaging, the right channels, the websites, the social media, but then your packaging doesn't give good instructions on how to use it, use your product, right? And I'm using products in this instance. So you know, how do you package all these elements to reflect, you know, your brand strength and really assessing your brand elements. So looking at this, right, do you have your logo? And I'm going to show you just what does having your logo mean, right? Just how important each component or each element of your branding is in order to steer the course, right? You're running a business and you need to have something that's sort of this guideline of how far, you know, you will offer, how far, you know, where your limits are, who you don't service, who you do service, you know, the types of suppliers you work with. It really reflects a lot of who you are. So these elements are very important. So I want you to just think about it. Are you clear on what the tone of your brand is at this point? Do you have your logo files? Do you have a slogan? You know, do you have a brand name? Do you have packaging? And you know, those characters and things like that. So you can assess and see, okay, if you have at least, 4 out of the 6, you're on a good path, right? Or you need to maybe fill in those blanks. So using this is a great way to assess and audit your brand. Do you have these fundamental elements, right? So when a buyer or you get a big order and they ask you to send your logo file, it might need to be in a particular format, right? So you want to make sure that these elements, you have it ready so that when that growth opportunity occurs, you're ready to enter that phase, right? So I'm just going to show you a real example of a brand we would have enhanced actually through YBCC as well. So this is Bluetown Market. This was their original logo. They are located in Bloody Bay in Tobago, and they sell greengrocer similarly like us, fresh greengrocer items, and they have some processed items as well, but they're from this area of Tobago where provision, Blue Food Festival, all that is reflected there. So this was their original logo. And with the enhancements we were able to do was, the first thing is, you call Bluetown, reinforcing in your logo, that reminder. Like, I'll remember Bluetown because the logo was blue. It's called Bluetown, and that recall is there much faster, right? So you still have the fresh elements, you include the provision, you include the Blue Food to demonstrate that, and you still have the fresh elements around and still resonating with the carrot, that because the brand was around before and would have had some brand recognition previously, right? So going deeper into the brand elements. So when you have your logo, and again, we're auditing ourselves, we're just checking in to see, okay, do I have these elements, these key elements of a brand within my business, right? So as you can see with Bluetown, you have the full logo, you have the exact color codes that are used within the logos, the secondary colors, the main brand colors, and the color codes are there. So if this brand has to now print labels or they have to print packaging, it's important for them to have those codes for the printer. And all these things strengthen your brand, right? So when you have your logo, you also need to have it in a format that can be presented in black and white, that can be scaled down, that can go as small on a social media icon or as large as a billboard, right? So knowing the exact font to use, you don't want that every time someone sees your brand, there's a different font, there's a different color being used. So these are some quick audits you can do. Like right now in your logo package, do you have editable formats of your logo? Do you have those logo files? And these are important elements or key components to having your branding and your logo ready for that growth path, right? So as you can see here, they identified, where in Tobago to find them and things like that. And we would have done that branding. This is some of the packaging. So again, the local context of saying Bago style pepper sauce, right? There are a lot of pepper sauces on the market. So this brand is using their local context, differentiating themselves, and again, translating their branding now into their packaging and labeling. And again, everything I show you here is real brands, right? They're real Caribbean brands. And you, just to demonstrate that you can be at any stage, but work on your branding and building out that assessment, right? These are some other brands in St. Vincent and the Grenadines that we worked with. So this would have been their original label. Like this was ingredients, like this was on a food label before. This was their logo before. This is a food brand, right? So this is their original label. This is the branding that they received after. Again, it's from the SVG Island. So you want that island feel. And then, the different syrups translated now into a label, into a squeeze pack and things like that, right? So there's a demonstration of just showing how important branding can be to communicate and to ensure that you have some of these elements like your logo, your packaging design, having it in formats that are ready to be used if you need to send it to a buyer, a store, a distributor, all right? Another example, this was the label on top. And then now this is the new branding with the labels. Just being very clear. And again, it's your unique perspective and your USP, but also within the context of these fundamentals of what it takes to enter that global context, right? So there's information on your label, compliance, things like that that are required. And this is another brand. This was their logo. This was their label. They then had an updated label again, you know, with updated branding representing the island and just sort of reflecting a cleaner finish to attract their target audience. So I'm gonna do a little quick activity. I know Shadrana would have said about checking the chat, but if I check it, I'll just
Yeah, before you go into the activity, Rish, we do have two questions coming up around brand element.
sure.
One is asking, well, Stacy is asking if it's applicable to if you are the brand. So I guess it's more around personal branding.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I would need like a little more context, but in today's world of building a global brand, founders are, it is important that, you know, there is this human and this character that represents the brand, right? People want to know who they're buying from. There's so much more access to information. So I do think that, sorry, that it is important. But yeah, that's kind of, but I would need to know exactly like the brand and which segment it's in to really assess that. Hopefully they win the one-on-one consult.
Right, so Stacy, hold on to the Q&A and you'll get more information on that day. There's another question around the character. Is it really important? Is it a must for upcoming business?
No. So you don't need like Chuck E. Cheese, or you don't necessarily need a character. It's more how I use it is if we don't necessarily have a character for our brands, but I kind of build out what does that character profile look like? What would that brand ambassador or that representation, that character, what would it look like? And we're gonna do an activity actually later on that's gonna kind of help you maybe pull out, you know, what is that character of your brand? Because again, it's all about association and getting people to remember your brand, recall your brand in a large market, right? So that's good.
That's it.
Okay, so the activity, we're just gonna do a very quick activity. So we're assessing here, we're auditing ourselves within the brand elements, and you don't have to have every single element ready, but it is something that it sort of makes up that full high value, increase your brand value. So the activity here now, and I know sometimes it's hard to like audit yourself because you're living it. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna ask you all to audit a brand that we would have done packaging enhancement for, right? So I'm gonna show you all the brand, the packaging before, and then the branding and the packaging after. And if you could, you know, just shoot in the chat, just some words in the chat that describe those, you know, what does the brand feel like to you? What is it saying? What is it communicating, right? Is it fresh? Is it healthy? Is it, you know, but looking at the packaging and the branding before, and then seeing how it could be enhanced after. And again, this is a small brand, and I'm just gonna give you some backstory as we show it. So this is the brand before. It's called Ambrosia Foods. Ambrosia is a type of flower, and as in blooming flower, not kneading flour. So Ambrosia Foods, and they make cheese straws, right? So it's a snack product. It's actually a traditional Guyanese snack, and they do different flavors in it. So it's like a cheese cookie, basically. So this was their branding before. This would have been their logo here. You know, this is the label, this is the packaging. The flavors are written here. It has natural, homemade, addictive as some of the descriptors. And this is the overall brand hit, right? So just thinking about a couple words in the chat, what does this brand make you feel like now, right? So does it feel like natural? Does it feel homemade? Does it feel addictive? Of course, you have to try it, I'm sure. And there's that homemade element. Why is it homemade? Where's the story behind that, right? So this is the packaging that was done after. So just shooting out now with the upgrade, with the updated logo, with the enhanced packaging, with the flavors identified to the side. The packaging is actually made from paper, so it gives that natural feel. Of course, when you taste the cookies, it tastes very homemade and rich. And it is addictive because it's savory. They have the different flavors. They have herb and cheddar. So again, just some words that just sort of, what do you feel about the brand now, right? Ambrosia Foods, natural, homemade, addictive, cheese straws, right? So in the back as well, they would have put in an iconic symbol from Guyana as homage to where the brand was founded. So again, you got to audit another brand, right? So think about it as a consumer, looking at a brand, looking at your own branding, looking at your packaging. What would the consumer really feel about your brand, and are they getting that messaging across, right? So that was just a quick activity. I see the chat is like going up, so that's good. So exactly what you're doing right now is great. Like, it's how do you do that now to your own brand, right? So
Yeah,
again,
Rachel. Go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. A question?
No, you go ahead. I was just giving a recap of what's happening in the chat.
Okay, cool. So again, back to the agenda. We did the
Before-
we did the assessment. Right? So we did the assessments. We learned how to audit our brand more or less in a quick way there, where you know what the brand elements are, what does your brand represent? And we're gonna go a little further in on how you can audit your brand a little further. So we assessed ourselves, we assessed someone else's brand. So now that you have assessed yourself, you need to design, a framework for your brand, right? How to determine, and the outcome is that you'll be able to determine your brand value, right? So we're in this design phase. So be gentle with yourself, be honest with yourself, but you need to determine, what are your brand values, right? We're designing something, right? You have an idea now where the gaps might be in your brand strength. So how can you design something now that demonstrates your strong brand value and differentiation, right? So with this designing element, we're gonna see what is your secret sauce, right? So everyone, I don't care how the brand is, everyone has that secret sauce or activity or tool that they use to sort of differentiate themselves and makes them be unique, right? So understanding your brand value is very important to figure out, where that secret sauce is, and you're designing this out. What's your differentiation, right? And then who are your competitors and your customers? So when you're designing this, you're kind of figuring out, who you are, which is most important, as in who your brand is. And I'm going to show you some layers to that. What's your differentiation? Like, what makes you stand out? What's that secret sauce? And who are your competitors and your customers that exist, right? So understanding your brand is, you have to ask certain questions, right? What industry or sector are you in? So if my brand is in the health food sector, immediately I already know, certain colors might work best, who my brand ambassadors might have to look like, You know, they may have to be persons at least trying, who my target audience is going to look like. It might be persons wanting to live a healthier lifestyle. So understanding that is really important, and understanding, you know, what industry or sector you're going to be in. Because when you look around, you're going to see players doing certain things that consumers are already accustomed to, or your audience is already accustomed to. So where's your brand positioned, right? So is it premium? Is it affordable? Is it commodity type? Is it very luxury? It's 1 in a million experience. Where's your brand positioned, right? And how do I translate this to packaging? So understanding your brand, you want to really figure out what industry, the broader industry you're in, where you position, and then how do you translate that through your packaging, right? So I think differentiation is your number one opportunity here. You want to differentiate, but fit it into the constructs of a global landscape, right? And I'm going to use a lot of food analogies because I'm passionate about food. So I always look to making callaloo as, and if you don't eat callaloo, just think pela or something, some other meal that no matter what, you know, somebody else makes it, everybody callaloo tastes different, right? I've never really eaten the same callaloo more than once from different people. So everyone's callaloo sort of comes out different. It has a different taste. And the reason behind that is there's so many elements within making this recipe, right? So one element is, and this is how you figure out your secret sauce. What are you doing in creating these recipes or creating these products or creating these services? What are you doing that's differentiating, that's helping you be different from everyone else, right? So one layer of making callaloo is the sourcing, right? So you need to find the right ingredients and the right inputs. So you can't make callaloo without, you know, certain ingredients like the callaloo bush or the okra. And then of course, every island has a different recipe, right? So they have different ingredients, but where you source those ingredients, that's kind of one of your differentiators, right? What are the inputs that you're putting into your brand, into your products or your services, and where you're sourcing it from, right? So that's one aspect of differentiating. Then what are the tools you're using? So you can't use a frying pan to make callaloo, right? So what are those tools? And are you using the right tools and utensils to create this brand or to create this product or service that you're promising, right? So you need to look at your sourcing, where you're sourcing from, what are the tools that you're using? Because sometimes just out of habit, we use the same app over and over, but there might be an app out there that can do 10 times what your current app is doing, or the way you're communicating with your vendors, or the way you're communicating with your customers, right? So those tools and assessing your tools is a big part of building out a strong brand, right? So we're designing again. So the methodology. So everyone has a slightly different recipe to making callaloo, right? So some people make their coconut milk from scratch. Some people use powdered, some buy the cartons, right? Some people only use very orange pumpkins, or, you know, clearly I know a lot about callaloo. So the methodology is really important, right? So using the right methodology. So you may find a formula that exists, and again, within a global context, but you can tweak that methodology to differentiate yourself, right? So you can maybe peel the stems and your callaloo comes out smoother, it doesn't scratch your mouth, you know, so you can figure out what those differentiators are. Then, of course, the most important thing is your secret ingredients. Everybody put some different ingredients in callaloo, some different spice or herb or whatever it is. So you have to figure out in your brand, what is that unique experience that you're bringing? Like, there's no one who gives better customer service than me, or money back guarantee, or quality ingredients, or handcrafted, whatever is your secret ingredient, right? That secret or special skill that you alone have, or somebody on your team has, that helps your brand stand out and be remembered. And then a very important thing in all this is timing, right? You have to, there's a part of brand building where you just have to bite the bullet. You have to make the right play at the right time in order to make to grow your brand and get into that growth stage, right? So the timing of when you do things is very important. Your calorie could come out burnt if you don't have the right timing. So really what makes your recipe or what you do within your brand really special, right? So that's your differentiator. How are you sourcing? What are the tools you're using? What's the methodology, the secrets ingredients, and then the timing that you're doing all this by, right? And I do this a lot because I think these are a lot of things that can hamper and affect a brand or slow down on a promise that you might make. You may say you can fulfill something, but you need to know what your methodology, you need to have that documented and that process documented. So I would say take some time to think about, you know, what differentiates you. And through this methodology, through this making of this recipe, you can identify, okay, what I'm special here. This is where my skill is. I know how to, you know, do this the best in this way. And exactly for my customers who might be health conscious, or my customers who are men, or my customers who are women, you know, so understanding that is really important, your differentiator. So a big part of understanding, as we said, this designing phase is you need to understand your brand value, right? You need to know what your differentiator is. And then now you need to kind of know the competitors, the players, and the customers within your landscape. So I would use, like, for instance, my own brand. And we would, and I mean, in the Caribbean context, I will say we have a way of, you know, ignoring our competitors, but it is important to look at who your competitors are, look at how they operate in the space, especially if they are much bigger or more successful. Again, you're looking at case studies in this context because there is no 100% foolproof way. You have to really think about the context of where you're located, what does your brand stand for, who are you selling to, right? So your competitors is a big part of that. You need to understand who are the top players. What is your unique selling position? So ours is we have no additives or preservatives. We're naturally sweet fruits. We're processed at the peak of ripeness for better tasting smoothies. We blast freeze, so there's longer shelf life, and there isn't any additives or preservatives added because of that. And it's the only 100% locally grown frozen fruit product where all the inputs are 100% locally grown in the Caribbean right now. So, you know, these are our differentiators. These are our USP, but we are not as big as a Dole. We're not as big as, but we can find those differentiators to identify. Once we know how are we different from the competitor, we can then now convince the consumer that, hey, my brand is better because we have no preservatives, we have no added syrups, or we're locally grown and we support local farmers and the local economy, right? So another component of designing this is you need to know then who are you selling to, right? Who is your customer? So our customers are people wanting healthier choices. They create healthier local options. You know, they like the niche market, you know, they are expected to pay for convenience. They don't mind paying for something more convenient and healthier, as we know. So in some instances, someone might be frugal in one way, but they may spend their money on frozen fruits, right? So you have to find your target audience, and it doesn't always have to be someone with a lot of money, but it's definitely someone who might be focused on health and wellness, right? So again, back to the agenda, we were assessing, we are, you know, we designed at least a framework of, you know, who our customers are, what is our differentiation, and again, it's applying it to yourself here, right? And we have a sort of design of, you know, knowing who we are, we know where the gaps are, what we need to work on to now start building a strong brand. And these are some of the things that we would have done of the fundamentals of us building out that stronger brand, right? So your brand pillars. I think this is something that I took a very long time to apply in my own business, because when you're first starting, you want to be everything to everybody, right? So what your pillars do and establishing those pillars, it helps sort of reinforce that foundation of your brand. And once you establish what your brand pillars are, you really don't want to ever compromise on it, unless it's, your brand has completely evolved and this is no longer relevant and you're going to evolve by replacing it with something else, right? So those brand pillars are very important. And most of this part of building is you're doing an activity that is specific to your building out your own brand, at least contextually right now. So what are brand pillars, right? So it's really those words and or phrases or that culture that describes or reflects your brand, right? So I like to choose like one word, very short. So if you say one of your brand pillars, for instance, is quality, right? You can never compromise on quality, right? The moment you do, you lose trust in your customer, especially if you're saying it's high quality, and then you cut corners or you change your formula without alerting the customer. And even if you do change, there's still an audience who can, or a target market that may want to purchase that, right? So never compromise on your brand pillars. Once you set that in motion, you have to actively find ways, how are you fostering those pillars within your company? So if you chose, for instance, we are health and convenience, sometimes we want to sell, the fast selling snack items, but we don't, because if we say that our brand is around health, then our customers may lose trust in us if we sell things that are not necessarily that healthy, right? If we talk about convenience, we have to make sure the customer can go to our website, shop online, pay online. We have customers from all across the world and on Market Movers who would order for their families here. So they're in the diaspora, they would shop online. And if we say that this is convenient, that they can come to the website, order for their families, and every time they're checking out, there's an issue, the site is shutting down, then we're no longer selling convenience. Or if they pay for express delivery and we don't deliver the next day, again, it's no longer convenient to the customer. So if you set a pillar for your business right now, and we're going to do a little activity where you're going to choose some of those words or strengths that you think your brand has and what gives your brand strength, that go or that push, right? So these are some words here: trust, innovation, sustainable. I'm sure some of you have words or pillars that already exist in your company, and that's okay. But I'm telling you, you should be auditing yourself constantly. Well, at least periodically, because things can change. And when you're thinking global, things can change very quickly and very easily sometimes, right? So you want to always be auditing and figuring out what those pillars are, what those words are that represent your brand and give your brand value, right? So this is a brand we would have, Chief Brand Products. They do spices and things like that. So these are some of their brand pillars, right? And this is how we communicate it, through visual communication. This was like a billboard that was in the groceries and things like that. So one of their brand pillars is taste, right? So what's the first thing you're gonna do? You're gonna put a nice bowl of curry or something, right? To demonstrate that or associate the brand with the best tasting spices, right? So that's one of your brand pillars. So if your brand is, one of your pillars is around taste and what the consumer can trust you for, know your brand for, then you have to make sure you get certain quality spices, I'm sure, or that it's not burnt or things like that. You want to make sure the taste is there, right? Another brand pillar they have is purity, so that they source the purest spices and the purest herbs, right? So again, the imagery, the communication reflects that purity, that fine, fresh feeling, right? And then another pillar is tradition, right? So obviously it's spices, so it's recipes being handed down for generations. And this is just to demonstrate how a brand can use their brand pillars and imagery to reinforce that, hey, the best recipes are handed down with chief, spices or whatever. Now, I'm not biased. I'm just saying that this is how they would have aligned their brand pillars to reflect and build and grow their brand strength, right? So the activity we're going to do, and it might seem pretty simple, but I actually did this for my brands, because I do think that by doing this activity, it sort of really gives you that character of or that persona, right? And the brand persona, again, it doesn't have to be the individual or the founder only, but it can be that person, that character that reflects those brand pillars, right? So if you were a brand animal, which is one of the questions, so if you think of an animal, I want you to just maybe put an animal in the chat that you think reflects your brand, right? So if your brand was an animal, would it be a lion or an eagle or a dog, right? And there's something non-threatening about comparing your brand to an animal, which can reveal powerful insights. So here are some of the examples that could help you stimulate your thoughts. So for instance, you can say analytical and thoughtful. So an owl is like that, right? So it's analytical because it stays up all night. I don't know how it's exactly thoughtful, but I guess how it feeds and stuff. Independent, ambitious, and strong like a lion. An octopus is considered intelligent and creative. An otter is playful, generous, and optimistic. And, community focused like a honeybee, right? So thinking of an animal that maybe reflects your brand based on character. And what that does is sort of help you remove yourself sometimes from being everything about the brand. It's not about just you, it's about everyone involved with the brand, your team, your products, your services. But by building out this character, it sort of helps, you redefine what that brand persona looks like, right? Without feeling too heavily burdened. And I found that this sort of helped me do that, right? So if you want to just shoot some animals or just think about it, but this is one way to just sort of get the thinking going around, what is that non-threatening thing that can sort of represent my brand, and then sort of pull out those pillars to then build this framework around your brand, right? So if I say we are focused on local inputs, then I have to, source locally, right? I have to, if I say I only use Caribbean frozen fruits, I can never put imported berries or something in our range of products, right? Of course, if we change or evolve over time, there's communication and messaging and ways in which you have to always, and that's why you have to always audit your brand, right? Over time. You have to just go back and say, is this still the messaging? Is this still the passion, the drive that exists within the brand? So understanding that is really important. So you can think of the animals. You don't all have to, but definitely think about it. I think it helps. It really did help me, again, separate that persona. So the fourth part so I'm just looking, yeah, a peacock, okay, a parrot, I like that. A turtle.
Yeah, see, we have a tilapia inside here as well.
Wow, okay. Hummingbird, that's one of my favorites. Yeah. Octopus. And this is, again, it's meant to be a little light, but it's meant to also help you, again, build that persona and that profile for your brand. So we've built out this process, and you know, we're trying to work with if you built a strong brand and you have some of these components, you know what your pillars are, you know where your strengths are. And again, you're applying it in your Caribbean context, right? So how are you gonna now, you build a strong brand, sustain it? How are you gonna future-proof it, right? And I know as entrepreneurs, like you're always between famine and feast, right? You're always thinking about what's the worst possible scenario that can happen here, and then what's the best possible scenario, because you have to remain hopeful. You have to remain, you know, that future forward thinking, right? So how do you sustain that? How do you future-proof your brand? And looking globally, looking at the global context, you need to maintain a strong foundation, right? And in order to do the foundation, I'm going to just share with you, you know, the 5 C's of branding, right? So now you know what a brand is. You know, we've sort of figured out what your brand differentiation is, your strengths are. You've audited your brand, you've seen where the gaps are, you've worked out where your strengths are, what are your characters, your personas around your brand. And you want to really find a way to sustain and future-proof that, right? So the 5 C's of branding. So now don't hold yourself too heavily again, but it's definitely a way to audit and check yourself, right? In your branding now, you have an understanding of who you are, and you're trying to fit it into this global context, right? So these 5 C's of branding, you must bring clarity, right? So clarity comes from knowing who you are, right? You can't really clearly share or bring clarity to your customer. If you are unsure, then your customer is definitely unsure, right? So you want to make sure that the clarity is there, and that comes from knowing your brand, knowing those pillars that you never cross, knowing what are the elements you're supposed to have, knowing your differentiation, knowing your target market, knowing your competitors. So you're very clear and you understand who you are and what you're offering, right? What's the problem that you're solving? So then you have to have, once you're clear and you have your vision, you know, you have to have a conversation. You need to find that voice, right? You need to have conversations with your customers. You have to have conversations with your buyers. You have to have conversations with your suppliers, anyone who deals with your brand, right? And it's finding your voice within that, right? And when you first start, you know, you're just a yes person. You're like yes to any opportunity. But within that voice and finding your voice, you've realized, okay, this may not align, and you may have to hold out and wait for something bigger, right? And that conversation is very important to have with yourself, finding your voice, but then also with everyone within your who touches your brand, who engages with your brand, right? And then you have to build a community, right? So who is this target market? Who is this community that you're building? So do you feel like you're clear, like you're clearly expressing who your brand is? You have your brand elements, and it's okay if you're not, but you need to make sure that you are very clear and that your customers are clear about what you're telling them, right? And then within that community, you want to make sure, you know, you really understand who your customer is. Not every customer is yours. And you have to be able to say no sometimes to customers who are not really your customer, right? And building that community, that following, and getting that, you know, where they have things in common. Some of our customers, they have similar illnesses, and they now share tips with each other and things like that, right? So you build a community around who your target market is. So if your customers are into fitness, we go to fitness burns, we show up there, we try to be around where we think our community exists, right? And then the content. What is this content that you're going to produce to now? And your content is really amplifying your brand story, right? So if your brand story is, mine is will work for food, you know, that we're passionate about local food, but we're going to amplify it by highlighting one of our farmers, or we're going to amplify it by showing a chef making a recipe with 95% local ingredients, right? So it's telling that story, those pillars, but amplifying it a bit through specific contexts and through specific ideas, right? And obviously within your community, within the customers that are going to engage and respond to what you're offering. And then after all that, you have to be super consistent, right? You have to build those habits towards succession. So one of the most fundamental requirements of building a strong brand is consistency, is determination. It's showing up no matter what and never really compromising. And there are times when you have to, but you have to make sure that you go back to the clarity as to why it's happening. You need to have a conversation. I need to speak to your community, right? You need to be honest and open and share with them as best as possible, why you may not have been able to be consistent, because you definitely don't want your customer or your target audience to lose that trust in you, all right? So I'm just going to show you all through our brand, just how we use some of the 5 C's of branding, so that clarity, communication, building a community. So this is one of our ads that we would normally run. So I'm just going to play it. You'll just tell me. Yeah. So that's one of our ads, again, showing that community, the clarity, the communication, where to find us, when to have us. You're having a workout, you would have a healthy smoothie, showing the beach life, the Caribbean life. And our tagline is really preserving the Caribbean way of life naturally. So everything is around being Caribbean, and then being natural, being a healthy product, right? So just showing you how we use the 5 C's of branding across all our channels, right? So if you have a website, this is our website. Again, it shows, the clarity of the logo, the branding, the messaging. So we have the preserving the Caribbean way of life. And again, this is very attainable if you apply or take time to really, or make time for this important component of building out your brand. So you hear it all the time where brands, I said it many years ago, we're going to just start exporting. But you need to be very clear, and you need to have your branding channel through all these layers to be ready for that global context. Because the first thing someone is going to do is search your website. They're going to look to see what are you offering? What are people saying about your product, the reviews, how you're engaging with your customers. So you want to make sure that when you construct and you build out this brand, this strong brand and your brand value, you want to make sure that you take the right time to really think about it and apply it. Because again, being clear, being consistent, and all these elements of branding, you want to make sure you're doing that. So this is our website. This is our email marketing. So we would do direct email to some of our customers, showing them recipes. This is another channel. Again, this is our website. We have a blog with recipes. Again, this reinforces the brand, right? If we're talking about smoothies being healthy and convenient, we have to provide recipes to our customers. It's just a form of communication and conversation we have to have with our target market, right? This is our social media. Again, it shows Caribbean, people who look like us, that local context. But there's, fresh farms, images, the smoothies, how it's being used. And you want to make sure that that branding is consistent across all your channels, right? This is some of our social media. So again, enjoy smoothies the Caribbean way, indulging in our Caribbean flavors, fruits grown in Caribbean soil. So the messaging is there, the consistency, because we want people to see the packs and remember, have that brand recall and that trust that we are healthy, convenient products. Then on the shelf, you can find us in grocery stores across the Caribbean, across Trinidad, and then some parts of Tobago. We're also in Barbados and Dominica. But again, it took time to get there, right? And you had to make sure that your branding resonated from the website to your social media to the shelves to your packaging. There's all these layers where your brand is being communicated to your audience, and you want to make sure that it's consistent, it's clear, and it's represented in a way along your brand pillars, right? So if we do promotions in the grocery stores, we'll do promotional campaigns. We make smoothies with other brands too to get that other collateral, because someone who eats yogurt may also drink smoothies. So you have to be thinking about, you know, where does your brand exist? And once you're clear about who you are and you've built that framework, it's easy for you to then now find this community, find those persons who want to use your products or need your products. But, you know, that assessment, because you all are in businesses and should have your plans, your business plan, your framework, those things, it has to be profitable. It has to think about people, and it has to think about the planet, right, in a global context. But here now, we find those niches and those spaces along the marketing channels to make sure our brand is consistent, right? So I'm just sharing with you all, this is a sell sheet. You would have to present this to a buyer or distributor. You need to have a write-up of your product, your portfolio, what you offer, the costing, the suggested retail price. So there's these elements that you need. And this is an example of branding, right? So sometimes things go wrong, right? A customer called us and said they open a pack of the pineapple, and it happens because pineapple actually oxidizes much faster than our other fruits. And if the cold chain cycle is broken, you know, it oxidizes and it turns dark, right? So sometimes in the grocery, the freezer stops working. We don't always have control over that. And instead of hiding away or saying, well, when we put it in the packet, it was fresh, you know, the customer experience doesn't reflect our brand. So what do? We create communication that says, hey, if you have a pack and it doesn't look like this, contact us right away. We replace the pack, right? So knowing how to deal, how your brand would operate in the best scenario, the worst scenario, is really important. And what do you put out there for the customer, right? Just to get that image out of your head, I'm just gonna show you some nice fruits from the frozen fruits. And again, we're at the fitness events. We're going where our customers are. You know, they're having smoothies, and we want to make sure that we have our brand there, the trial is there, and that messaging is there, right? So that those 5 C's of branding, you need to really see it go across that consistently. And the fifth and final part is the growing, right? How are you going to grow in this global context? So you need to define what global is for you, right? And if you're thinking about a global context, you have to be thinking about people, that triple bottom line of people, planet, profit, right? Because that's where globally where things are going. You know, consumers want to know, you know, who are the people behind this brand? Who are your suppliers? Can we trust them? Especially if you're in food, right? Then the planet, you have to consider the environmental aspect. Everything now is about the environmental context, and it's very necessary. And if you're thinking globally for your brand, is there an element where you have that sustainability side of it, right? So with Farm and Function, how we compost all our organic waste, we do farmer training, we build, you know, capacity building for farmers. So we care about that part of it, right? And then the profits, of course, you're in business. You have to be making a profit. And you may not for a very long time, or you may not for a period of time. But you have to always remember that, there's the balance sheet that you're looking for, where you can manage these three elements in a global landscape, because the consumer is going to want to know who you are, what do you care about the environment, and are you a sustainable brand, right, that they can count on and rely on. And then where your marketability meets that compliance, right? So you're growing where you think you're seeing where you want to go out in this global landscape, but there's all this compliance around meeting those requirements, right? And it's okay if it can seem onerous, but there are agencies, there are support systems. That's why you're here right now, getting these insights that can help you find that sweet spot in that growth path that you're on, right? So this is just a video of me talking about Farm and Function. And again, the 5 C's of branding here about, the clarity, the communication, who am I speaking to, and the tips that I can provide here. So I'm just going to show a short video here. And I've been an entrepreneur for 13 years. And I started out in the service industry, food service, D Market Movers Ltd. And we wanted to create a physical product, something that represented what our brand was about. And that's how Farm and Function came about. We're the only local frozen fruit product on the market, grown 100% in Trinidad and Tobago. And our packaging, all our inputs are locally sourced. The smoothie sector, the health food sector, it really took off in the last 5 years. And we saw an opportunity. On the shelf only had the imported berries, it only had all the imported fruits, and we wanted to offer Caribbean people something grown and made just for them. At Farm and Function, we seriously pride ourselves for local. Choosing the pouch company was important to us. It was a local manufacturer, flexible packaging, and now we can safely and confidently say that 100% of our inputs are local. The fruit is local, the packaging is local, which is why we went to the pouch company. You're not just talking to a consumer anymore. You're talking to buyers, you're talking to vendors, you're talking to importers. There were instances when we would just mail our empty packages and we would be approved to be listed in stores just based on the packaging. They didn't have to get the physical product, which is a quick sell for us. I'm Rachel Renie. Right. So again, that's just to show the growth part of it and giving that global story. And never feel afraid to tell your brand story once you clarify what it is. But you need to tell your side of it, your brand story, and share that. And it doesn't always have to be you in front of the camera. But getting someone, a real person on your team to maybe do it is very important. So that growth part is where, you have to know you're clear on who your brand is. You have some of the elements, you understand how to build, your brand pillars, apply it, and, make it sustainable by making sure it's consistent across all your channels, right? So growth kind of happens when you sort of figure that out and you can work on your marketability because you have this strong brand value, right? And your this brand offer, right? So you can now work on that global aspect where marketability meets compliance. So in any global context, we know compliance, there's all these requirements, and I have some tips here on just packaging and stuff. But marketability is really figuring out that fundamental style, who your target audience is, of course, your marketing strategy, and then the packaging that's suited for that, for your brand within that marketability context. So again, making sure we have this fresh smoothie feeling. And again, this took years to get even the budget to do like the right photos and things like that. It really takes work and a belief that, in your brand. And I think once you understand your brand value, the things sort of and resources sort of come into play because you're pitching something, an idea, concept to your customer, investors, buyers, and you have to be very clear about your brand, about what you stand for. And you have to understand who your customers are, their age. It doesn't matter if you have 10 customers. When we even had 10 customers, we knew who they were, their age, You know, and we try to go deeper into that profile, right? And it's very important to do that. Part of growth is this, again, with the marketability, we just recently enhanced our frozen larger bag packaging. And it's because the consumers were asking questions that weren't on the packaging. A simple thing like how to make a smoothie. And we were able to add some elements and enhance the packaging design through Market Movers Design to really speak to the consumer in that way. Now, the compliance, we know with packaging, food brands, you know, you need certain elements like your label approval, your lab testing, your certificate of inspection for your premises. And these are some of the steps that are necessary to get your free sale certificate when you have a food brand. I'm giving that context because that's mainly our customers that we service. So when you have compliance, what it does, it gives your brand a higher level of trust because you meet the requirements for this global landscape. And understanding the compliance is important so that you can meet it, right? And it's not impossible. It could be onerous at times, but it is possible. I know very small brands that have their free sale certificate that were able to get into larger retailers just because they met the compliance, right? They did the right thing, they followed the due diligence, and that allowed them to enter into a global landscape. Because if they go on a particular store and it goes online, someone from England could see the product, and that's how you really translate and transfer your brand into that global landscape, right? So compliance is a big part of it. No matter what sector you're in, you need to know what is required in the industry and what those compliance steps are. And there are agencies, support systems that, you know, if you want to do compliance for your food brands, there are services out there. And of course, you can always reach out to me. Again, with the compliance, we would have enhanced, you know, the brand name, the product name, the description. We added how to make a smoothie, scan for, to see the recipes online. You know, we enhance the imagery, those things. So these are all elements that we would have used to sort of get into that growth stage, right? So when you're thinking about growth, and I know I'm sharing a lot, and again, from my perspective, but those brand elements, and we'll share the presentation, of course, after, but it's taking what's really special about your brand and amplifying it. You have to tell that story. You have to share what your brand is about, why is it different, and consistently do that with some of these tools and elements that I would have provided, right? And then I'm going to just share here lastly, some of the brands that we would have worked on, some innovations. This is Dasheen cereal. It's cereal made out of Dasheen, out of Tobago. And we were able to help this Caribbean brand, you know, enhance their branding, enhance their packaging, meet compliance so that they can now enter that global landscape. So a lot of times we work on the product or the service and we don't think how we're going to package it, how we're going to brand it. And you can't skip through those steps, right? So a lot of what I showed you, you really have to take the time, take a day, if you can, but really go through those steps and those questions around, you know, what is your brand about, right? Again, this is the brand before. They would have had a simple pouch with a sticker. We were able to help them enhance and now compete. They have to compete with a Betty Crocker, right? You know, we did packaging for roti, for Weefu's Roti Shop. So like this is the packaging before, but now the brand has, you know, stronger brand strength, stronger packaging enhancements and things like that, right? And again, you don't have to do all this in your business. You can find support. You can find those who can help you with this branding and packaging. I know the cost can be prohibitive, but there are agencies and support services that can help you with that. This is another brand, is frozen cookie dough. I mean, so many innovations have come out since, especially after the pandemic. where you see innovations in convenience items, especially. This is out of Guyana. This is a shake up, like a shake and bake mix. I mean, this is Montano's chocolates. We would have done their packaging design and their box design. Again, but that differentiation, right? What does your brand stand for? And this is a Caribbean Roasters brand. This is some packaging we would have done with the different blends. We did Hong Wing. I mean, this is one of the most iconic brands. When you think this is a 100-year-old company, and they're still evolving, right? They went from just simple packaging. Now they understand that the coffee consumer is more discerning. They want flavored coffee. Everyone is drinking fancy coffees now. So they realized that they had to pivot and also enhance their branding and their packaging and telling their story in order to reach that global platform. This is a brand out of Guyana. It's plantain chips, again, enhancing. They were able to get a grant with their branding and packaging through a program we did. Again, before and after packaging, just showing how you can streamline, make sure that your brand is clear, that the packaging reflects what the brand stands for. This is split pea rice out of Guyana, like soup in a cup, I guess. So like you can actually heat up the rice in the microwave in a cup. Beef pepper pot out of Guyana being packaged. So there's no stopping of creating unique products and services within the Caribbean. I think our exposure to all these different cultures, it gives us a unique perspective. And creating a brand, you need to pull in some of those elements, those differentiators, the things that make you stand out and differentiate in the marketplace, right? And with that, you can apply it in your branding, your framework, your packaging. This is a dip, Caribel Foods. They were in bottles before with labels. They transferred into pouch packaging. And now they're able to distribute to more stores and things like that. They met the compliance, all the things that come with getting ready for that global brand building. And it's one step at a time. It's not overnight. Lupino Chocolate Company, and this is Seymour's frozen cubes blended with other flavors. Again, so many innovations coming out of local products, right? Fresh microgreens. This is plantain chips out of Guyana. Seafood out of Barbados. Maruga Hill rice. We worked with so many Caribbean brands to help them with their marketability, branding, packaging design. And you see the impacts, like this cocoa wine won an award in Germany, and they just had to mail a sample to Germany, right? So these are things that can really help grow your brand and get you ready for that global context. And it doesn't have to be the same way for everybody, right? But going through the fundamentals is so important, and taking the time to apply it, because everything I've shown you here today is from very small micro companies to very large companies, but they're all within the Caribbean, right? They all started from scratch, and they use their brand strength, their brand value to leverage and find markets in a global context. And it kind of naturally comes once you present, with clarity and consistency and all the fundamental things that I would have shared. So that's me.